Welcome to Conversations with LSN Tap, where we meet interesting people and hear how they are increasing access to justice through technology. Here's your host, Shelley Reed.
Hi, my name is Shelley Reed. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Conversations with LSN Tap podcast. Today we are here with our guest, Marabi Madrigal and Mallory Curran, to talk about Lyft. So I'm going to give our guest a chance to explain more about that to you in just a moment. But welcome to Marabi and Mallory. How are you today?
Hi, Shelley. We're doing well. How are you?
Thank you, Shelley. Glad to be here.
So I want to start with having you tell us a little bit about yourselves. We'll start with Marabi and then Mallory, if you don't mind giving us a little introduction to yourselves.
My name is Marabi. I work for Kids in Need of Defense. I am the Director of Case Management Systems there. I've worked for Kind for almost 9 years now. I do all range of tailoring the case management system for the organization across its various needs. I am based out of LA. I work remotely, and I'm born and raised here. Very excited to be able to support Kind's national work, international work from this location, and get to take all of those learnings and share them throughout the community. And so thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about Lyft here today.
Awesome.
And I'm Mallory Curran. I am a consultant. I work in a few different areas. One is technology. That's what brought me here today. I also work in consulting with medical legal partnerships, and those are interdisciplinary collaborative teams that work together to improve patient and community health. I have worked in the civil legal services community for more than 20 years now, both in Cleveland and in New York City. And with my consulting over the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity to work with people all over the country and Puerto Rico as well. So really glad to be here with you all today.
So a lot of really diverse experiences. How did your paths cross? And we'll start with Mallory this time.
Yeah, so Marabi and I were actually introduced by a colleague of Marabi's, Michelle Giesman, who I also have the good fortune of working with. And I would sort of hear little things here and there. Michelle would say, I have this new colleague, Marabi, and she's just so amazing. She's so thoughtful, she's so smart. And so I already had this I wanted to meet Marabi because Michelle thought so highly of her. And then actually Marabi and I were on a panel together. So we both feel very, very strongly about the importance of technology and efficient processes in civil legal services and other nonprofit legal spaces. And we had the opportunity to be on a panel where we were discussing how important it is for organizations to invest in technology to help them meet their missions. We also wanted to encourage people to think more broadly about who can be an amazing tech person and to look internally for staff who could be great at that as well. And we felt like if they did those things, then they would have opportunities to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organization. So when we were putting that together, Michelle said, I really think you should have Marabi be on this panel because these are things that she cares so much about. And that was really the first place that I had the great good fortune of getting to know Marabi and starting to learn from her.
And that was a lot of buildup, but Mallory is famous in the community. And so I've known of her for much longer than I had the pleasure of working with her. She's an incredibly well-respected and active member of our community. And so in any group space, Mallory is an active voice there, always, being willing to offer support or advice to people and various listservs that we see and various group and community calls. So I had a lot of respect for her just as a member of the community who would learn from her advice and guidance that she would give to people. And so, yes, when she asked, the answer was an obvious yes. As she mentioned, also my colleague Michelle, when I first learned about Lyft and knowing that these two people who I respected so greatly and had been so instrumental in my development were creating this little initiative, let's call it at that time. For me, it felt like a no-brainer to jump in and participate, and it's been a really great experience for me thus far. And so, Mallory gave me a lot of praise, but The praise also should really go back to her, and anyone who knows her and who has had the pleasure of working with her knows that the investment that she puts into the community is really, really great. And it's just a pleasure to get to work with her in this as well.
That's really awesome that, these strange things like conference panels or, other just unusual circumstances bring us together with people who have like-minded, thoughts and ideals. Um, so that's awesome. So I want to dig a little bit more into Lyft and kind of the origin story of, how Lyft got started. So Mallory, can you talk a little bit about what the problem was that needed to be solved? And then we'll ask, some follow-up questions there.
Sure. So I'll take a little bit of a step back and say that LIFT stands for Legal Server is Fun Together. So LIFT focuses on people who work to configure and customize the Legal Server case management system. And what Marabi and I are going to talk about today is specific to Legal Server, but it's not only about Legal Server. And a lot of the things that we're doing with Lyft and the issues that we see or the opportunities to make things better certainly apply with, to the organizations that use LegalServer. And there are many, hundreds of those at this point. But they, as I say, they don't only apply in the LegalServer space. And then I also want to say, just to be clear and transparent, that Marabi and I do not work for LegalServer, the company. I'm an independent consultant. Marabi works for Kids in Need of Defense, or KIND. So we work in partnership with LegalServer and appreciate their support, but I just want to be clear that we're not employees of LegalServer ourselves. So when I went into consulting, I thought I would only be consulting on medical legal partnership. I had no plans to be a technology consultant. I had the opportunity, along with a colleague, Chris Schwartz, to help our organization that we were working for at the time transition from an old, outdated case management system onto LegalServer. And I just really got the bug. I thought it was a great system. I loved that somebody who has no tech background or tech training, could learn how to do it and configure it. And as somebody who'd been a staff attorney and a supervising attorney, somebody who'd had a lot of grant reporting responsibilities and so on, I really got a sense of how powerful of a tool it could be. But it was really hard to be a supervising attorney and try and learn how to do LegalServer at the same time. But I thought I was the only one in that struggle. I thought it was just me who didn't have enough time, just me who was learning more slowly than I'd hoped to, because I had all these competing demands. And it really wasn't until I got into the consulting space and went to LegalServer training that I realized how far from alone I was with those struggles. So really, over the last 10 years, I've done a lot of consulting on LegalServer, and something that I learned is that there just are not enough highly skilled LegalServer administrators in our community. And that makes it harder for organizations to fully optimize LegalServer to meet their needs. And what the organization wants to do is help a lot of people. And when LegalServer is like humming and going great, it really helps them do that. But a lot of people struggle because there just aren't enough people who know how to do it. So I thought, one of the reasons that I went in consulting, I have this like informal mantras like, oh my gosh, there's got to be a better way. There's so many things that kind of trip us up, and I'm trying to think about how can I make things easier for the people doing the work on the ground. And so when we don't have those highly skilled administrators, we see a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted opportunities for low-income communities, for staff, and for people who fund the work. So in the back of my mind, I had been thinking for a while, like, how can we get there to be more highly skilled LegalServer administrators? So that was problem number one. We need more. And then another problem that I noticed I can talk a little bit more about later is that really an underrepresentation of people of color in tech, in legal tech, and within the nonprofit legal tech space. So those were the two problems that I thought when we were getting Lyft off the ground that we could try and address through this program.
Yeah, absolutely. That recognition that, there's a problem with representation in law schools, right? And that just bleeds over into the space. it's just all over. And so much of what you just said, Mallory, resonates with me because my prior to law school life, I was a subject matter expert for a system that's used by local governments. And there was no training. When I came in, there was nobody to share with me how to do anything, right? And I think many legal aid organizations and case management systems are the same. There might be some initial training provided by the case management company, but then all of those employees that come in after the fact are just kind of left to themselves. So it's a problem throughout, I mean, through any industry that has a proprietary system that they're using within their organization. So we talked a little bit more about that. Are we ready to move on to what inspired you to start Lyft, or do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the struggles?
I think I'll just reiterate a couple points that I think that I started making, and Shelley, that you were making too. And one is that when somebody comes in to do a tech role, Shelley, as you're talking about the role that you had before you went to law school, or we're looking at folks who are LegalServer administrators, some of whom are attorneys, some of whom are not attorneys, some have a tech background, some have no tech background. But whatever their role is, they're often the only person at their organization who does that job, or they're one of two or three. And so it can be pretty lonely to do that. And so, and also often not, as you described, Shelley, there's not a clear path about what steps you should take to become good at your job. And so I think one thing that I see that I'll reiterate that we had sort of talked about is that I think there does need to be a bigger investment by the organizations, public defenders, civil legal programs, law school clinics, court-based self-help programs, or whoever, to sort of solve that problem of there not being enough time, or there not being enough staff, sort of, money and time focused on this. So that's number one. And then the other thing, Shelley, that you noted is sort of an unclear training path. And often it's not so hard to get access to training where you're watching somebody else do it. So you're watching somebody else do something that you want to know how to do. But I think what people really want is hands-on training, something that looks really similar to what they're going to be doing in their day-to-day job, what they're going to be asked to do. And learning by watching is a start, but people really want to learn by doing.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's so much there to unpack. And also I think there's in organizations, there's not a recognition of people who have, taken the time to teach themselves things, right? Many organizations make the mistake of thinking, well, there is a hierarchy in users, right? Where they might invest more time for staff attorneys using case management systems, and maybe not so much with front desk staff or intake staff. However, I think we all recognize the fact that intake staff are probably the ones, that really delve into things and really are the one become the experts for their organization on, that everyone, many times there'll be that one person who really just digs in, learns how to use it, and then everybody comes to them for advice. But that knowledge is not recognized within the organization as far as financially, or as for uh, promotion purposes. So really interesting. So,
And I think, Shelley, you're touching on a really interesting point. If I could just expand on this a little bit as well, the benefit of exactly what you're talking about, right? I think sometimes people assume these de facto informal roles that are not really recognized, and the organization is actually missing the fact that these informal training programs are happening, right? That it's like, it's an initiative that, I started just because I saw the need. And then the danger there on the flip side is that, like, if that person leaves, you are missing the fact that this, the system was happening within your organization. And just recognizing also too that training is not just important on the back end administrator side, it's very important on the front end side, right? Even having a standardized process for recognizing like data tracking to this organization is important. And why is a huge step that I think a lot of organizations miss. And it's exacerbated by having one of one or staff attorneys sort of tasked with the sole responsibility of managing grants or metrics for their specific program. And then you have one person doing one thing one way, you have another person doing another thing another way, all people who don't have training that is formal. You really start to kind of create this like mess in your system that can be really, really difficult to untangle. And I think that those are two things that are missing, right? Not just the front end user, the role that certain folks are playing to sort of upend this good technology practice, this good data quality practice, that I think like is very interesting and deserves to be paid more attention to. Especially when we're thinking about that front end user need. That's really how I started getting involved in data management myself. It's just like people didn't know how to use it, and so I was like, here I am, right? And I have some time, and you don't, obviously, right? And so I think that recognizing that and identifying those folks who take on those roles as well is how Mallory and I have identified it creates an opportunity to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just finding the appropriate people within your organization who can maximize the investment that you're putting into that person.
That's awesome. So let's kind of turn now. What I mean, we've kind of touched on it all throughout our conversation, but what really inspired you to start Lyft, to be involved with Lyft, and what helped to shape the focus um, of who you're reaching out to with the program?
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. So as I said, when I made that shift to consulting and became a consultant, I was really struck by the underrepresentation of people of color in the legal tech space. I was really used to working in a much more diverse environment with more diverse colleagues, and I wanted to work in a more diverse environment than I was seeing, and I also wanted people from a variety of backgrounds to feel welcome in our legal tech space. And in putting together Lyft, I was really inspired by three women from outside of technology and from outside of the law. And that's Shalane Flanagan, Aminatu So, and Ann Friedman. So Shalane Flanagan is an elite American distance runner. She's an Olympic medalist, and she's a New York City Marathon champion. And, in that world and that she was operating in, it was very competitive, right? And, what can I do to put myself ahead? And the sort of a culture of thinking like, if I'm helping others, then I'm harming myself. And she really rejected that notion from within her community. And she built up a community of women runners, formerly her competitors, but found that when they all worked together and supported each other, they all got better. They all improved. They all started showing personal best. They all started, outperforming what they had been doing on their own. And I also was really inspired by Aminatu So and Ann Friedman, who together started this sort of concept called the shine theory, sort of if you don't shine, I don't shine. And you can learn more about it at shinetheory.com. But they sort of ask, like, would we be better as collaborators than competitors? And for them, the answer is almost always yes. And that's the same for me, sort of this notion that bringing out the best in the people close to you also brings out the best in you. So I felt like those three women were really speaking to the kind of colleague and community member that I wanted to be, and the kind of community that I wanted to be part of. So during the pandemic, there's a small group of women consultants, and so we started coming together once a month just to support each other and talk about challenges. In theory, maybe we're competitors in this space, but really we all had the same goal, which is to support the organizations who are providing access to justice. That's the most important thing to us. So we were there for each other, but we also, wanted to do something together and thinking about how could we support people of color in our community and create more highly skilled LegalServer administrators at the same time. So we thought about how can we create the structures that are necessary to make everyone feel welcome in our community, for them to feel safe in our community, for them to feel like our community is a place that they can learn, and to feel like our community is a place where people have their back. So that's where we started thinking about sort of the basics, which were one-on-one learning, having the opportunity to learn one-on-one with somebody who has LegalServer experience, and sort of this notion of partnership. Um, so we ran a pilot, which Marabi will talk little bit about here, and I'll hand it over to her to talk a little bit more specifically about what it is that we do. But another question that you had asked, Shelley, or wanted us to think about was like, how do we shape the focus of Lyft? That the women consultants had this like initial idea, this is what we thought would be helpful. But ever since the pilot and throughout that, we've really had the focus shaped by the people who are participating. Are we meeting your needs? What else could we do? How could we make this better? So we ask and people answer, and that's really how we've shaped the focus. So as I said, I'll turn it back over to you, Shelley, but I know Marabi is going to talk more specifically about what actually does Lyft do and who participates in Lyft.
I really love those women, the examples of the women that you mentioned. As a former runner myself, I experienced that where I had a friend and we pushed each other to become better. So that really resonates with me. And I love that, your group of consultants during the pandemic, where we're all, many of us were struggling, for many, many reasons, but a group came together and, really created something out of that bad period, that is continuing to change the world to be a better place. So that's really, really exciting to hear, another example. We see on a daily basis in our world, social media and the whole mean girl philosophy, right? Where women and people just don't support each other. So I love to hear stories of women supporting each other. I mean, we're sisters on this planet, right? Although although as many of us had also experienced sisters who weren't the nicest people either. So, so maybe sisters doesn't always describe the best way that we should treat each other either. But that's really awesome. So Marabi, before I get too far off track, I wanted to give you a chance to describe Lyft and your training cohort and how you have run the program so far.
Yeah, so I mean, you're touching on a very important like piece of a moment in history, let's say, right? And it was in that context that I, as a person who was sitting in my home, isolating, right, received an email about this opportunity to participate in this cohort, and not really knowing like how long has this been running, not really understanding like what am I gonna get from this, right? I really held on to the ideas that you're talking about and that Mallory mentioned, right? Community, building a safe space, allowing for continual learning. And again, touching on the fact that it was run by Mallory, Michelle, other consultants, Laura Bly, Vivian Hessel, I believe, also in the community, who are incredibly well-respected members of the community. Again, like it was an easy thing for me personally to want to buy into. And it really gave me that during that period of time, a space where, I was a focus and I was being offered help solely for the purpose of my professional development, from somebody else who was also seeking community during that time. And so it felt like a very selfless space, for me at that moment in time. And, almost every major step in my career has been influenced in some way, shape, or form by a mentor or a colleague who took the time and effort to guide me. And Lyft was really no different. And so for me, to just talk about like how the iteration of Lyft, has continued and what my role has been, I like to think of myself as a helper, and I'm so grateful, that so many people in the community, and within Lyft have created this avenue and this space to be a contributor to that community that has given me so much thus far. And I don't think I've ever said it that way, but I think that describes most of the people who I get to work with as part of Lyft, who are contributors to a community that gives back to them. And a creation of a safe space, while Lyft tries to center people of color, a safe space benefits everyone, right? A space where you can ask questions in a non-judgmental way that benefits everybody. And we'll talk a little bit more about the results and stuff like that. But I really think that the community that we have is one that really supports, and has helped people take scary steps and brave steps along the way. And that goes for people of color and, not people of color, white people as well. And so that's a really wonderful space for me to be a part of and feel like I am contributing. And I think given that, this is such a unique role, as Mallory mentioned, like you can be one of one in your role at your organization. There isn't an established practice for anything. There isn't, like, nothing is established. Like you are sometimes just kind of on your own. And I think that Lyft has allowed people to connect across the country, across the world sometimes, and start to create the community that we want to be a part of because there is nothing there. And so if Lyft is a part of that, that's something that I can be incredibly proud of. I know Mallory's incredibly proud of, and I think that everybody who participates in Lyft in one way, shape, or form, however big or small, if it's just filling out a feedback form, or if it's running a training, like all of that is equally valuable and is a contribution to this community that we want to be a part of at the end of the day. And so I can jump in and talk about a little bit how we incorporate that into our training offerings as well. So I think the most important thing is the premise of any training. Sorry. Stop,
No,
pause,
wait,
go ahead.
sorry. I want to jump in and maybe Robbie, you can just do this, which is just to say a little more specifically, like exactly what Lyft does in terms of, taking more experienced admins and matching them up with less experienced admins, meeting, every month, things like that.
Yeah. So just to talk a little bit about what exactly Lyft is and does, it's primarily a partner matching program where you and me, I'll speak about my experience just because I think it'll make it a little bit easier as joining that pilot program. So what I was offered was the opportunity to once a month meet with somebody who could answer my questions about LegalServer or not LegalServer also. And that touches upon how being a database administrator is also not always just about being a database administrator, which is really helpful. There was an offering of group trainings. And so we offer monthly group trainings that are available to anybody who has ever been a part of Lyft today, which is really wonderful. And allows for continual participation of people in the community. So if we offer a training this cohort that we didn't offer last cohort, you are more than welcome to receive those resources. So more than welcome to share those resources. I don't think that we are very strict or restrictive on where those trainings go, because again, it's all part of contributions to the community. And we offer, for the first time ever, we're also going to be offering this year a leadership session touching on some of those aspects that are not database related. They don't have to do with your technical skills, but they do have to do with how you go about developing a strategy for your case management system, with how you can go about advocating up the chain, down the chain, sideways to your colleagues, how to talk about what the role of case management is for your organization. And so it's this trying to get at this holistic picture of what it means to be a database administrator through these individual one-on-one conversations where you can really get into the nitty-gritty of, I don't know how to configure this thing, whatever that might be, to I don't know how to get people to like take me seriously. I don't know how to get people to implement a data check process. I don't know how to get people to want to buy into, hey, let's revisit our intake flow and see what could be better. So it's this, very granular and also very big and nebulous. And I think in that way, we really established this reputation for people who have a depth of experience at various organizations that all have different types of problems, but all kind of couched in that same core problem that Mallory talked about, that like people are not maximizing the value from their systems even today. And so that's what Lyft is still trying to contribute to, and hopefully help organizations start to take baby steps to maximizing the value from the systems that they invest in.
I think that's great. I think it starts kind of as it starts as a mentorship and training opportunity, but it develops into kind of a built-in community. And I think it speaks highly when an organization has their alumni come back and participate in future events and activities. that to me tells a lot about the organization, right? If you didn't enjoy your time, then you don't come back and participate. But if you see a lot of people coming back and participating, that means that there was benefit and there was something there that they were not getting anywhere else, right? So I think that's really exciting to hear that now you're expanding into leadership, because we do have a problem in in the legal space that often um, admin staff or other staff can feel that they are lesser or underappreciated. um, and the mindset that we have to have more staff attorneys to meet the needs of our community just overwhelms still many organizations. So getting ways for these organizations to recognize the value in their staff that aren't attorneys, right, is very important. So that was really interesting to hear your experience. And I wanted to dig into, we've mentioned several times that people of color and people from underrepresented communities. So I wanted, Mallory, can you give us a little bit more information about who um, is Lyft available to across the country?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question, Shelley. The sort of core program of Lyft, the mentorship program that Marabi was talking about, has really expanded over the years. So that mentorship program takes less experienced administrators of color and pairs them with more experienced admins, some of whom are people of color and some of whom are white. So from the very start, that's been the model. We open an application for people of color to say, I'd like to participate in the program. And then as many more experienced admins as we have to pair them with, that's how many pairs we have. So in that pilot, we had 4 pairs. And we've now are in our 4th cohort, and we've increased every year. And now we're up to 28 pairs. So we have, this year, we were able to have 28 LegalServer administrators of color partnered with more experienced admins. And to go back to something else that you said, Shelley, that I think is really important, our favorite place to recruit more experienced admins is from the Lyft program. So we do have a lot of people who start the program as a quote unquote less experienced administrator who then come back to join us as a more experienced admin, which has been great. And I think really speaks to, Shelley, what you were talking about, of people really seeing the value of the program and wanting to come back to it. So that core mentorship program for Lyft, that's sort of been our bread and butter. In some ways it's available to people across the country, in some ways it's not. You do have to be a person of color in order to apply to participate in the program as a less experienced admin. I will say some of our less experienced admins are actually quite advanced. So what we have them do a self-assessment as either beginner, intermediate, or advanced, and we get people from all 3 of those categories. And so it is limited in that way. But we do get people from all over the country. And then as we've thought about how we might want to expand, we've talked several times about the purpose of the program really being to support and advance the professional development of people of color, but also to advance the level of practice in the community overall. And so Marabi has really had a vision for how Lyft can leverage what we already do, what we already have learned from the mentorship program, to create services and materials and resources that are in fact available to anybody in the community. So right now there is sort of a Lyft serves a certain cohort of people in our community, but we have grand plans to, as I say, apply what we've learned to make available to everybody.
I appreciate you sharing the allyship opportunities that are available. So the program focuses on one, area, but there are opportunities for other people to be involved And I would say that there's opportunities for executive directors and other admin staff leadership of organizations to encourage their, their staff to be involved and to
Yes.
provide the opportunities for their staff to be a mentor or to apply. So thank you for being very clear in that opportunity, Mallory. I had missed that myself. So that was very helpful, and I'm sure our audience will benefit from hearing that as well. So, Marabi, do you want to dig into a little bit of where Lyft now is, where Lyft is now? We've heard about the your cohort, which was the initial cohort. I believe you're just finished accepting applications for the fourth cohort. Is that correct?
Yes, we just finished that application period. We kicked off, I think, in September. And so we have really tried to, as much as possible, our content have it be as much of a self-running machine as possible, and so that we can really focus on the new aspects of what we want to bring into Lyft, right? So we work with people to set up those trainings, and fortunately, I think we have more volunteers to lead trainings than we ever had before. And so we had the wonderful problem of being able to say, hey, we don't have space or trainings for you to offer this time around, but you can contribute to Lyft in some other ways, or possibly next year. And so we're starting to see this new problem of more people wanting to contribute. And so finding a way for us to harness that volunteer energy that we don't have in our existing running programming, and how can we move that? And so I'm really glad that you called out that opportunity for others to who are not case management system administrators to participate within Lyft, to the leadership aspect, to some of the organizational management practices that are really key and foundational to the job that I do every single day. And just to touch back to what Mallory said, I describe my job at Kind to others who I'm working with as, I'm here just to make your program look good. I want to tell the story that you want to tell with your data, right? Like I take no credit. I take no, like I don't shine if you don't shine, right? And so the happier you are with your system, the happier you are with the outputs that you are collecting in your data, the better I'm doing at my job. And that way we can really make it a partnership. And that's also something that I want to communicate and create within the community, is this sense of partnership between your administrator and program facing staff. And so bringing those opportunities into the new Lyft cohorts, I think, is really, really important for me, so that folks can start describing their roles in that way as well, or whatever way is most successful at your organization. Ultimately, every person who participates in Lyft knows their organization best and knows best what they need. Um, and so we take in all of that feedback. We have, for the first time ever, ran an orientation, which I hope to talk about a little bit later, where we kind of laid out the whole plan for what it looks like to participate for Lyft with Lyft for the 6 months. We also just wrapped up the first year of the advisory council for Lyft, which is another wonderful volunteer opportunity for anybody who feels strongly about what Lyft is doing and is looking for ways to give back. Participating within the advisory council is one of them. And so thanks to the support and guidance and advice feedback from the advisory council that we had last year, we were able to develop a strategic plan, which we are hoping to launch soon in the new year, within the month, I believe. And really looking forward to having the strategic plan mark the beginning of like pushing a more public presence. And so, as Mallory mentioned earlier, like we're very much running under the radar, but we're a really big community. 28 partner pairs is, I'm not good at math, I think it's 56 people just in this one cohort alone. We've reached the point where there are over 100 people who can say that they were a part of Lyft in some way, shape, or form. And that represents over 50 organizations. And so while it is a very quiet thing that we have been doing, the impact that we have had, I think, in the community and in people who are participating and who continue to participate within Lyft, as you mentioned, year over year, I think it points to something that we really have something that people want to be a part of. And so we take all of that feedback into the future development. And so I'm really looking forward to expanding the public presence, to expanding the opportunities for people to get involved in Lyft, expanding opportunities to actually fundraise. And I think that's something that Mallory and I joke about. Like, if we've been able to do so much with almost nothing, imagine what we could do if we had a little bit of something. And that little bit of something, I think, is what we're looking for, to be able to give that contribution to the community as a whole. Because at the end of the day, I care about, just as much as I care about, my organization being able to remain compliant, tell their stories, all of that. I care now about every organization having that opportunity, and having people who are really well trained, to come into their organizations and help them do that as well. And so that's kind of where we are with Lyft. I don't know, Mallory, if you wanted to add anything to what I said.
No, Robbie, I think that's great. Some other things we might touch on and other questions from Shelley, but I think that was good.
Well, I think that's a kind of a great segue into a question I have for you, Mallory, is what are some of the challenges that you have faced along the way? Starting any kind of movement can be a struggle. So what are some of the things that you have struggled with and maybe even overcome?
Yeah, so I have to say, as somebody who has now been part of this community for more than 20 years, that sometimes you have programs that are a great idea and it's going to help so many people, and it's really hard to get it up off the ground, and it's really hard to get buy-in and find the right people, and that's just a normal part of doing business. But a couple of times in my career, everything has just come together so beautifully, and Lyft is one of those projects. So people are just very enthusiastic. It's really has come together so smoothly. I think people understand what it is that we're trying to do, and they think it's really important, and they want to be a part of it. So, the number one, sort of, is this resonating with the community? Can we get the right people on our team? That just hasn't been an issue. People have understood it. People have wanted to participate, and that has been great. I think Marabi sort of alluded to this. I think the challenge for us is going from a volunteer-driven organization that receives in-kind support from LegalServer. I want to say we have a project manager who is supported by LegalServer, Sandra Tricha. She's the best. And we could not have expanded from our pilot of 4, mentor-mentee pairs into 28 pairs. So that's been hugely important. But in order for us to expand further, we need actual dollars, actual financial investment. And as I said, Marabi really has this vision of where we can go, creating training materials that really take real world scenarios and have sort of multimedia, hands-on learning by doing opportunities for the LegalServer administrators, like a one-stop shop for people to come and say, okay, if I need to know the basics about LegalServer, I go here. A place that references existing LegalServer training materials, of which there are many, but also provides, as I said, those like hands-on opportunities with videos and checklists and a case study. Here, your organization just got a new grant to do this new project. How are you going to create a funding code? How are the staff going to be able to collect the information they need? How are you going to be able to report on all the wonderful work that you did? We really want to do that, but we need funds in order to create those prototypes and then, to build on that and make it available to the community. So Marabi referenced our wonderful advisory council and our strategic plan. So those really address our next steps in bringing in those dollars. So that has been the number one challenge for us, I think, is making this transition from a very low resource, volunteer driven organization into one that's well resourced and sustainable, that keeps our core work of supporting and advancing the professional development of LegalServer administrators of color, while also, making high quality training and other resources available to our entire community.
That's yes. Funding is always the hard part, right? I think in any kind of startup or any kind of nonprofit or you have to be able to grow. At some point, money becomes part of that conversation. So all of this is done on a volunteer basis. So I'd like to ask Marabi, we'll start with you. And how do you balance your work with the commitments that your commitment to Lyft and your other, life? So how do you make some kind of balance?
I'm gonna be honest here. I'm sure that everybody would say like I could be better about this, but I want to just point to something that Mallory just said was that with Lyft, eh, this feeling of like everything just kind of fell into place. I think has been very true for me in my life. The moment that like Lyft was launched by Mallory and these consultants, as she mentioned, was the perfect moment in my life for that to have happened. The moment that Mallory asked me to continue to work with her in developing Lyft's programming was at the perfect moment in my life where it was very easy to say yes. And so I think that's the challenge that I've had for my life is only saying yes to those opportunities that feel very natural in the moment. But at the end of the day, I like to invest my time where it matters and where I feel like it gives me the most back also. And so um, every time I do anything for Lyft, regardless of what it is, there is some kind of feedback that I get from it that like keeps me engaged and like re-engages me time over time. And so that I don't think it's about balance. It's about sacrifices. I think there is no such thing in my opinion, I think there's no such thing as a balance. It's you make sacrifices in one place to devote your time in another. And for me, the best part is that it doesn't feel like a sacrifice is the sign that this is a place where it's worth investing. And at the end of the day, also recognizing too that all the time that I invest into Lyft is time that I get back. It's learning that I get back. So if I'm developing a training, I have now learned how to teach other people better, right? If I am involved in developing a worksheet, I have now honed my skills or tested my skills as well. And so in that way, I think it's been very easy to make some of those sacrifices and to try to find that kind of balance between the things that I'm doing in my day to day, the things that I do personally, and the things that I do for Lyft. Is everything just makes me a little bit better when I participate in Lyft, and I think that's what people have found in the community as well.
Awesome. So, Mallory, did you want to talk about balancing work and Lyft?
The balance for me is really thinking about the future. And so, as a consultant, I have turned down work in order to make sure that I had enough time to volunteer into Lyft. And I think of the volunteer work that I do with Lyft on our sort of core mentorship program as something that I want to be volunteering every year. But the expansion that we want to do and where we think Lyft can go, it won't be sustainable unless there is funding for it. But I think it's so important. I believe so wholeheartedly in what we're doing and the chances for Lyft to become this sustainable, powerful, supportive organization for years to come that I've made the decision to volunteer more time last year, this year, next year to hopefully get it to a place where it won't require that level of volunteer service because there'll be, jobs for people to make it run. So it hasn't been easy, but I definitely think it's worthwhile. Very excited to see where Lyft is going to go, and as Marabi had said, just very proud of what we've done with almost no resources, and really enthusiastic about what I think we can do with resources.
Yeah, I think back to the old saying, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? And that is, it's so true. It's if you love what you do, if you're passionate about what you do, it's almost like there's no like hours in the day, right? we're willing to we're willing to stretch ourselves because we have such belief in what we're doing. And it's never, well, I can't say never a hardship, but it's rarely a hardship because of our passion. And that's what I'm hearing from both of you. Um, so I want to turn a little bit and
Kelly,
see, of
can I actually go back and say a little, I want to build on
course.
something that you said actually, which is that something that's always been important for Lyft is that the voices of people of color be at the center of all our decision making, but that burden is not exactly the right word, but the burden to continue Lyft should not fall disproportionately on the people that it's intended to assist or support. And so I think that and we've also been talking about the role of allyship and things like that. I think there is a huge role in terms of allyship in creating these structures, creating these programs that while they're benefiting everyone, the responsibility or the burden for sustaining them should not, fall on the folks who it's intended to assist. So I just wanted to add that piece in, and then also say, something that I've learned over time is to say no, and that it's okay to say no. But I think in Shelley and getting what you're talking about and just being thoughtful about what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to, because it's not healthy to say yes to everything, and you can't do a good job when you say yes to everything. And so I think that gets at what you're saying is that, I feel so good about the things that we're doing with Lyft, and it's okay that that means there's other things that I can't do as much of as I maybe did before.
Yes, definitely balance and making choices. I wholeheartedly agree with what you say or what you said. I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily good at practicing it, but it
Yeah.
is something that, life is giving me more opportunities to learn. So,
Yes.
um, I wanted to give you all, both a chance to talk about success stories. I think we have one here with us today. Marabi has gone through the program and is continuing to work with the program. But are there other success stories, things that just make you, at the end of the day, you can say, this is why I'm doing it? Start with Marabi.
I think for me, anytime that I hear or learn of somebody taking a chance to be courageous and brave and make a career shift because of their participation in Lyft, that's the whole point. And so for me, it's I don't want to use any names. I didn't ask permission. But anytime that we hear that in our community spaces, anytime that I hear that in we have this wonderful project that is also going to be live imminently. So I'll talk about it a little bit, and hopefully your audience can refer back to this when we're live. But we are going forward with a site of sorts where people who have participated in Lyft are sharing their impact, like what impact Lyft had on them, why they work within Lyft, and listening to those stories has been incredibly gratifying and wonderful to just keep you motivated as like to invest those times, to make those sacrifices, to make those trade-offs, and to try to find that balance. And so for me, those are the biggest success stories. We do have some data, which is helpful also. And I think in the last cohort, 99% of the less experienced administrators who participated, reported that their skills improved, and 92% of the more experienced partners also reported skill improvement. And again, so just pointing back to the fact that this is a learning space, and that's the premise of everything that we do in Lyft is anything can be taught and anything can be learned. And if you center learning and you center mistakes as learnings within this community, I think it creates this learning space for everybody. And that's what I'm most proud of. And so seeing continually that the more experienced partners are benefiting just as much as less experienced partners within this, I think we're touching on something that is really, really the success story of the community that we're trying to develop. And so that's for me, the biggest one.
Mallory, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, so building on what Marabi had said, there's a couple of things that have happened that just made me feel really good. Things that when we started Lyft, that I hoped would be true. And one, I described at the beginning how people can feel very alone, how I felt very alone, how I assumed that I was the only one who didn't really know exactly what I was doing. And so whenever, we hear people in Lyft say, oh, I thought I wasn't very good at LegalServer. I thought that I that everybody else knew exactly what they were doing, and I was the only one sort of floating around out here by myself. And now I understand that I am part of a community of people who are learning, that no one knows everything in LegalServer, that I can learn it, that anyone can learn it, that we can do it together. When we have those moments, that's hugely important to me. Marabi references too that, it's always been our sense from the beginning that the more experienced admins, the mentors who participate in this program, that they also would be learning, that the learning goes in all direction in our program. That's why sort of internally we don't use the mentor-mentee language. We use more experienced, less experienced. And when we, get those results back and the more experienced admins are describing the ways in which they've gotten better at their jobs, that's very meaningful. And then I'll say in the fall, there was a LegalServer training in Philadelphia. And this year there were 25 people who participated in Lyft who attended. And a number of them were brand new to the program. They had just found out a couple of weeks before that they would be participating in Lyft this year. And we had these little ribbons that said Lyft that LegalServer provided to us to put under our name tag, so you visually see who was in Lyft, and just to sort of watch people, oh, you're in Lyft, I'm in Lyft, and to have people just sort of dropped in to be part of this community and say, I haven't felt seen in the tech world, I haven't felt seen in my job, and I came here and I felt seen. Those are wonderful things for us to hear. That's what we hoped the program would do.
And for
Awesome.
me, just to expand a little bit on that, my favorite anecdote of this year has been our first ever orientation. And so I had the incredible privilege that I didn't know. I didn't know what to expect coming out of it. It was my first time running it. But I had the privilege of just walking through this new cohort, what our offerings were, giving tips as to how you can maximize the value that you can get from your one-on-one partnership meetings, from attending the group trainings, from identifying use cases to practice and things like that. And after the hour, there's just kind of somebody asked a question. I was like, any question? Somebody asked why, why people were doing this, why we were running this program, what did we get out of it? And to be able to just touch on so many of the things that we've talked about in this conversation as the motivating factor, the reason why Lyft is able to support these new incoming cohort in this way. It was just like a moment to take a step back, and I wanted to share that because I don't think that there is an appropriate avenue, and I wasn't able to tell every single more experienced administrator, but I feel like if every single more experienced administrator had witnessed that moment, it's one of those cycles, right? That feeds you and makes you want to give back even more. And so it was a really wonderful moment, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that when you're in these spaces, it feels very special because it is about just helping for the sake of helping, and you stumbled on a community that is helping for the sake of helping, for the sake of making things better. And so I think that to me encapsulates everything that Lyft is trying to do and hopes to expand on moving forward.
What a special thing. I think that is what support groups would love to be able to say, right? That is why many support groups are started, is we want to help because we want to help, and to have achieved that is a really a great accomplishment, and something that you should both be proud of, and everyone who's involved with the program should be proud of. So we've kind of hinted at some things over the whole interview, but are there any special plans for the future of Lyft that you want to share? And we'll start with Marabi.
I teased the microsite. I'm really excited about our upcoming public presence and just making Lyft a little bit more known, demonstrating kind of the impact that the more experienced partners are having, that less experienced partners are sharing their stories as well. And so just being able to have a place where people can talk about what Lyft has given them because people want to. It's relatively easy to find any kind of volunteer to talk about their experiences in Lyft. And so I'm really excited about being able to share some of those stories moving forward so that people understand the role that we have within the community. I'm really excited about our opportunities to join panels and different conferences, and even this opportunity as well. Shelley, thank you so much for it, to just continue to talk about what we like to talk about and why we like to talk about it, and hopefully, continuing to grow the cohort every year. I think we're getting to that point where every year we're a little bit nervous if we're going to be able to exceed the enrollment from the previous cohort. And so I'm just really excited about taking the step and having a more, it's really like a mindset, like a formal mindset of like, I want to talk about this initiative that has been running and that we've been working on and that has really tangible impact in the community. And I want others to know about it so that they can participate, be a part of it, contribute in some way. I'm really excited for that.
That's great. So for many of our audience, they may not use LegalServer in their organization. So I wanted to give you, Mallory, a chance to talk about what are some common mistakes organizations are making with their case management system, if you would like to.
Sure. So I think the mistakes that I see organizations making, one I talked about before, is really just kind of an underinvestment in their technology. And Marabi and I have presented with Sylvia Argueta, who's the executive director of the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, and she sort of describes her own transition from feeling like, oh, why do we have to do all this tech stuff when we have so many other, things that we need to do, to viewing it as just like absolutely the minimum that you have to do in order to keep the doors open. It's like paying the electric bill, that you have to make these investments today. You can't make those. And I think that's true. And I don't think that everybody's there yet. So I think just understanding that you need to invest more, especially internally in your own staff, for them to learn. And also I see, and this is related, that I think sometimes that when people are transitioning to a new case management system or any kind of new system, whatever it is, that they sometimes go into it with a one and done mentality, like we'll move here and then it'll be over. But really the maintenance and the configuration is as important, if not more important, than going onto the system in the first place. So it's not a one-time investment that you're making, it's an ongoing investment that you're making to help you meet your mission. It absolutely is mission specific. And also to try and view, I think some leaders sometimes feel like this is something I'm being forced into, that I have to do, instead of viewing these types of opportunities or transitions to new systems as like something that provides me with opportunities to meet my mission better, for my staff to do more with the time that they have. And then the last thing I'll mention is a mistake that I see among leadership is not listening to their staff about what they're saying that they need. And staff at all levels with all different kinds of responsibilities, to make sure that, the experts within your organization are the ones who are helping you prioritize what you need to do.
Absolutely. And pulling from those different job roles when you're making changes, right? Giving everyone a voice in those changes, because what someone in admin decides could really negatively affect the job of someone somewhere else in the organization if they're not given a voice. Marabi, what advice would you give to someone who is struggling with learning how to use their case management system?
Come to Lyft. I think it's that's a joke, but not really, right? Finding others in the community who have the same problem. I I really think that it's a vulnerable thing to admit that you want to learn. It's a vulnerable thing to admit that you have a problem. And I think if people just got over that aspect and recognized, and that's why I think it's so important that people share, everyone is underutilizing their case management system, including us, like at Kind, right? And so I can come here and talk about our success stories at my own organization, still knowing that I have a long ways to go. And there's so many things that I wish I could do if we just had more resources, right? But I'm in a really privileged position. I have a team, and we're solely dedicated to this one thing. But for others, finding that community, finding others who have similar situations, working together to find solutions to those common problems. If you know of others who are using your system, approaching them. Even if you don't, I think a lot of a lot of what is missing within this conversation of one system or another system is that the fundamentals are very similar. And usually what changes is just the interface. And so whether you're using LegalServer, Clio, or any other legal server, what have you, how you configure it is very similar, right? Like you'll have the same problems, you're trying to solve the same problems, you're just doing it with a slightly different interface. And so a lot of the time, the bulk of the work is in that, how should I do this? And then it's, what do I need to move around in this interface? And fortunately, for folks, LegalServer, LegalServer, all of these relational case management systems are very easy to customize, and the differences are very minimal one to another. And so therefore, the underlying practice of like, how am I going to incorporate this into my practice at my organization is really the problem. And that's where I think, Lyft is looking to in the future, right? Like right now, our focus is really LegalServer specific. That's where our expertise lies. But ultimately, the practices and the teachings that we have to share can benefit any organization, regardless of what system you're using.
So we're running a little over on time. So I wanted to open the floor of the things that we were scheduled to talk about, or we had on our question list. I want to give each of you a chance to address something. If there's something on there that we just got to make sure that we get out to the audience. Any thoughts? Anything you want to share?
Sure, I'll go first. There's one thing, Shelley, that is very important to me, and I know to Marabi as well, which is encouraging organizations when they're posting for tech positions to think really broadly about who could be great at what they do. So, one of the things that, I knew before Lyft, but has really been brought home with Lyft is how many people can be wonderful at being a LegalServer administrator. And we have people who have advanced degrees in technology or data management, such as Marabi. We have people who are attorneys, people who are not attorneys. We have people who went to college, people who didn't go to college, and all of them, there's a seat at the table, and all of them have so much to offer. And something that we've heard time and again from those LegalServer administrators who may have graduated from high school but not gone to college is that when there are job postings that say that either a degree is required or preferred, that it's a huge deterrent for them to even apply, because the assumption is that if even one person who has a degree applies, in addition to me, that I will not be selected for the job. So I just really encourage organizations to think about whether the degree requirement is necessary at all. And I would argue that for a lot of tech roles that it's not necessary. There are some tech roles, where very specific experience or education is appropriate, but not all. And so just being mindful of focusing on what the skills or qualities of the person you're looking for. And by skills, I mean attention to detail, or being a trusted person in the community, in your organization, somebody that staff go to. Shelley, you were sort of referencing that earlier. Not so much skills of like, do you already know how to do this particular tech skill? You can learn the tech skill, but there's so much value that people bring, people with degrees, people without degrees, that I just don't want people to use degree requirements in a way that's preventing or discouraging somebody who could be the best person for the position from even applying.
What a great point. You can't represent your community if you are eliminating the community through your job applications, right? So.
Right. If you don't have diverse candidates applying, it's going to be harder for you to have staff who are reflective of the community that you're coming from.
Absolutely. Marabi?
Very similarly, I think just harping on this idea of who can be a good tech person for your organization. I think oftentimes those responsibilities are also placed in the hands of attorneys, supervising attorneys, people who have caseload and people management responsibilities, who are already overwhelmed and have the monumentous task of learning also now how to be a technologist with very little resources and support. And like you touched on earlier in the conversation, Shelley, right? I was a legal assistant, a paralegal also, and I really understood our intake processes. I understood our data collection processes. I was very involved in providing feedback to our data team at that time, which was just one person, of like how we can do this better and bringing the realities of this is what it looks like to provide services on the ground. And I'm very fortunate that that person, took a chance on me who didn't have a technical background, who didn't have this formalized experience, and was like, actually, what you really, really understand is our business process, for this lack of a better term, right? You really understand what it looks like to follow a client beginning to end. You understand how to ask that questions of like where, things could be improved in the system, where they should go in the system, and really just like looking into people and understanding, having a clear understanding of what roles your different positions play within your organization can help you also create pathways to promotion that don't involve going to law school. And that's also, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I can advocate for is, a lot of people, I came into legal aid wanting to go to law school, and I decided not to. And I'm very fortunate to have found a community that I could be a part of that like allowed me to grow and still contribute to a mission-centered organization in the way that I wanted to. And I think that the more that the legal aid community can create those pathways to promotion that don't have to do necessarily with law school, I think is another great way of retaining your talent and just keeping your people to contribute back into your organization to maximize what you're doing. And so I think this is another huge point of pride for me at what we've been able to do at Kind. I think we're a team of 6 now, or we 8. I'm sorry, it's the new year. We're a team of 8, and of those 8, I believe 5 of us are internal hires who were former paralegals, former program assistants who just really understood how things worked in our field offices and brought those skills, talent, expertise to our team. I can teach you the technical skills as we've shown through Lyft and all of what we talked about through Lyft, but I can't teach you to care enough to want to change the organization and the way that the organization is doing. And so just recognizing that internally, I think is a way of demonstrating the value that staff in these administrative positions play who are non-legal staff. And offers that opportunity, like I said, to retain your talent and people who care about the work that you do.
Awesome. So how can people support Lyft, get involved with your mission, or learn more?
Yeah, so we've sort of referenced throughout this podcast that Lyft is at a moment of transition. We're going from really flying under the radar and just sort of like doing our work to having more of a public presence. So the opportunity to be here today was really fun for us, and thank you, Shelley, for that. Coming up in February 2025, we are going to be hosting a community call, co-hosting it with LegalServer, where we're going to do a really deep dive into our strategic plan. So a lot more details about where we want to go, as well as the website that Marabi had mentioned that features the stories of many people who've been involved in Lyft, which are really inspiring. So anybody who wants to attend that community call is more than welcome to do so. And so we have a little sign up link if you want to get a calendar invite. It's going to be on Tuesday, February 25th at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. And the link, I'll give you just a little bit.ly link, which is B as in boy, it.ly / and then all capitals Lyft RSVP 25. So that bit.ly link is bit.ly / all capitals Lyft RSVP 25, and we'll get you a calendar invite. And if you're not able to attend live, we'll also be sending out a recording of that. So anybody who's interested in a deep dive in Lyft should do that. And then we don't have the URL for our website quite yet. As soon as we do, we'll give it to Shelley, and I know she'll add it to the notes. But in the meantime, we do have a LinkedIn profile that people can check for that we'll be sharing the URL there. So that's linkedin.com/company /Lyft collaborative learning. So that's linkedin.com/company /Lyft collaborative learning. And then
Awesome. And
people
we'll
are
make sure to
also,
link those as well.
oh, thank you, Shelley. Yep. And then people are also welcome to get in touch directly with me and Marabi.
Awesome. And of course, we'll send out any information on our listserv as well. So last question, What is your favorite app right now and why? Or what tech tip do you have for our listeners? We'll start with Marabi.
In my personal life, I'm very low tech. So my favorite app currently is called Storygraph. One of my goals for the year was to read more. Embarrassingly, I'm a data nerd, and so Storygraph like gives me insight as to how many pages and how long it took me. And they use too many pie charts, is the one criticism that I would say. But it makes me happy to see just reading in this other way that I really care about. And so it's a fun way to, stick to my goals and things like that. So check out Storygraph if you're a big reader.
Awesome.
Like Marabi, I'm pretty low tech in my personal life as well. So mine is not an app, but something that truly changed my life was a remarkable tablet. So I first got it 5 years ago. I remember that I got it right before the 2020 Innovations in Technology Conference. I was very excited to bring it. And that was right before the world shut down. So it is a tablet that sort of works as if it's paper, and you can write notes or you can import PDFs and write on the PDFs. And I'm somebody who I struggle to keep paper organized. And so having everything on my remarkable tablet, it keeps it beautifully organized. And I really love it. And you can't like access websites from it. It's like a low distraction tablet. So it's my brother, who's a very high tech person, was sort of like, I don't understand the problem that you're trying to solve with this tablet. So it's not for him. He just uses his other devices for this kind of thing. But I appreciate that it's like sort of just like having an actual paper notebook, but much more organized than it would be if it was an actual paper notebook for me. Remarkable tablet.
Well, those are great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to both of you for coming and sharing about Lyft today. I know that our audience will be excited to hear all the different programs, and I'm hoping that we reach the future cohorts for Lyft. And we certainly are going to be watching and seeing all of these upcoming changes and things, and we'll share them through our Ellison Tap listserv. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.